There is an ongoing debate as to whether top players entering the NFL draft should forego their bowl games. There's no confusion for Stanford running back Christian McCaffrey, who will sit out the Sun Bowl to focus on his draft preparation, announcing that Monday on Twitter. Leonard Fournette will also pass on LSU's bowl game against Louisville to focus on the NFL draft. Here's some Twitter reaction from some gentlemen I'd say are very qualified to speak on this subject. Ezekiel Elliott, you might have heard of him. He wrote, all these young guys deciding to skip their bowl games. I would do anything to play one more time with my brothers in that scarlet and gray. Derek Carr responding to a Kirk Herbstreit tweet on this subject. I played my bowl game with a jacked up shoulder, wanted to play one more time with my boys. Not even a thought not to play. Well, Kane, in the house, how we doing?
Good, thank you, Molly.
Good
Max.
to see you.
Stephen A.
What's up, man? How you doing?
Max, I want to start with you on this. Do you have any problem with the players sitting out?
Not at all. I mean, say it out loud. McCaffrey or whoever else. You should, in this case, you should risk your professional future, your financial future, and in the case of many of these players, a financial future that could secure the financial security of their family for generations to come. You should do it because you got to play in the Sun Bowl. Come on. Look, the NFL and the NCAA in football work as a de facto syndicate together and essentially coerce football players in this country. If you want to play on the highest level professionally in the United States of America, in the world, in football, you have to go through their college system. There is no minor league, and you will not be paid, and you will be asked to sacrifice or risk your professional and financial future, you know, in service of this. It never made sense to me why a player whose team had got no shot at the national championship anymore, their feet are held to the fire because they've made a commitment to their teammates and to the school, when that commitment was made in a world where they really didn't have much of a choice in the first place. And even if they did, I would strongly advise against playing in meaningless games, even meaningful games, if they feel that affects or risks their future. I got no problem with McCaffrey or anyone else sitting out.
Yeah, I think Max is wrong. And I started out where you are, to be honest. This was my initial gut reaction, but through the wonderful persuasion of my wife, and to no small extent Danny Cannell, who I think has done a good job on this network voicing this opinion, I have realized the error of your position. The error in your logic is more easy to see. Here's the problem with your analysis, Max. You have chosen the expedient path. There is principle and there is expediency. And often, expediency looks wise. Often, it's rational. And that's why I started out where you are. Of course, the analysis is exactly where you are. Of course, the financial decision is easy to see for McCaffrey or Fournette or many of these guys. Doing the right thing for himself is a clear path. But I would ask you this. Is there any value to college football for the player beyond winning a national championship, beyond preparing for the pros? Is there any value beyond those two goals?
Is that a rhetorical question?
No, I'm serious.
The answer is yes, if they would have chosen college anyway. But in fact, they really don't have a choice. So if I am a college player and I decide I have no choice, I'm essentially coerced into this free minor league system for the NFL, under those restrictions, under those pretenses, then I would say, no, they have no obligation because it was a coerced decision in the first place.
So this is the flaw in your logic. I agree, by the way, that college is a coerced path to the NFL. I agree that is unjust, but you're focused on only one relationship in this equation, and that's the relationship the player has with the institution or with the coach who often leaves his program before it's time. But there's another relationship in the question, and this is the one about principle. This is the fact I recognize the easy, maybe even the wise path is to go to the NFL, but the principled path is to honor the commitment to your teammates. You have committed, whether or not you're right that this commitment was somewhat limited, you are committed to these teammates to see this through. And there's value in college football in being a part of a team, of being in something with other men. And when you opt out of it, you have chosen the expedient path at the cost of the principled path. Now, that can have many, many sacrifices internally, Max. That can have sacrifices externally when we talk about broad swaths. Maybe for Christian McCaffrey, he made the right choice for now for him. But make no mistake, he's made the unprincipled decision.
Your argument is much cleaner if there wasn't coercion in the first place. If that was truly a free decision to play in college football, you have a clean argument. It's not, so you don't.
I'm going to address what you said because here's where I think you're wrong. I think you're wrong where you talk about principled decisions and what have you, because let's keep in mind that these are collegiate athletes. There's no union. There's no representation for them. I mean, this is big business, which is college football, and these dudes get exploited. And the universities are willing to look at you and say, well, you got a scholarship, be happy, shut the hell up, and go out there and play. So we understand that there's an absence of representation. It's 3 years that you have to commit to the university before you're allowed to go pro. You're using physicality as an excuse when clearly guys like Leonard Fournette was ready physically to be in the NFL at least a year ago, if not earlier than that. So let's take that into consideration. The other point, and the biggest point for me, when I think about this particular situation, what I don't like, and I was listening to Herm Edwards and Ryan Clark on Mike and Mike this morning talking about this, and I was actually upset that they didn't bring this up. Christian McCaffrey is an individual. He's white. He's at Stanford. As far as I'm concerned, I don't think he's been appreciated enough. Rushed for over 2,000 yards last year, rushed for over 1,500 yards this year, averaged more than 6 yards a carry. If he were black, he would have gotten more notoriety as a running back in college football for doing it. It was almost like reverse discrimination. It really is true that has happened to him. Having said that, here's where the problem lies. Jadeveon Clowney, and please show highlights of this guy when he was playing at South Carolina. He took plays off. And he was eviscerated. People vilified him all over the place because he was trying to protect himself and guard himself from getting hurt. And the notion was, if you're going to be out there, go all out. When you start off the season, you're committing to finishing the season. With your teams at 100%, you go all out. So whether you quit during plays, quit during games, or elect not to show up to games, it all gets lumped into the same category. And the fact that Jadeveon Clowney was vilified, but Christian McCaffrey, there's actually a debate as to him having not done anything wrong, Max, is where I disagree with you. Because my point is that if it was wrong for Clowney, then it was wrong. Then it's wrong for McCaffrey. Well, I'm not saying you said it, but I'm saying the argument that people would make where they look at McCaffrey and they have no problem with it, but they had a problem with Clowney. That ain't right.
So to be clear, you're saying now, in response to Stephen A's argument, you wouldn't have a problem with Clowney taking plays off in order to protect his NFL career? You wouldn't have a problem with Clowney loafing in on the field?
No, I think he shouldn't have been on the field if he didn't.
Okay, but if he's on the field, what?
Right. If he's on the field, I would say that in that situation, if you are favoring an injury because you don't want to aggravate
That's not what I'm saying.
Well,
no,
but that's essentially what it comes down to. That's essentially what it comes down to. It's like,
he had gotten healthy.
I have to favor myself. I have to protect myself. We talk about this with athletes coming back from injury or battling fatigue, etc. If he feels that he's going to jeopardize the rest of his career, his professional career,
Max,
and financial security to play in a college football game, I think that's absurd.
Your position is worse than I thought, because what you're saying is that even if he's healthy, but he wants to make sure that he can avoid a particular injury, he should go out there and give it half-ass.
Hold on. We talk about athletes rehabilitating from injury, for example.
I'm talking about on the field.
Excuse me. For example, Derrick Rose. You can even see players who do check out as healthy, but are constantly doing the mental check with their body. Wait a minute, am I okay to cut like that? And simply don't do it the same way, and largely that's psychological. What's the difference?
Max, the problem with your argument, I think the Clowney example has showed the absurdity of it, is that once you commit to something, you have to see it through. You have to give it your all, Max.
That's right.
You can't. The purpose of college football is not simply to make it to the pros.
Yes,
the purpose
it
is not.
Yeah, for these guys, it is
not.
Yeah, but that's a decision that the player gets to make for themselves.
And the point is, they've made that decision. That brings me to where I started. McCaffrey joined this team. He now has a commitment to his teammates to see it through.
Right.
He has chosen, in your analysis, Max, he has chosen the self-interested path. It is right for his pocketbook. It is wrong for the commitment that he made. I don't know why you're not with me on this. If you're with me on Clowney, he's got to see it through.
Because go back to the genesis of the commitment. If you really don't have a choice, you either commit or don't play football. That is not actually a commitment. That's a coerced commitment, and so if you at that point, yes, you are sacrificing the commitment you've made to the other players, which is unfair to them, for your own self-interest, and you have an argument that it is an immoral or unethical thing to do to those players.
Look,
but the fact that you entered into a coerced relationship in the first place undermines that.
I don't disagree that the system is flawed, that the system is very unethical,
rigged.
but it doesn't mean that individual actors within the system are therefore allowed to be immoral as well. You can be moral in an immoral system. You can do it.
I agree with that. I agree with that.
And McCaffrey can live.
Hold on. And that might be
McCaffrey
foolish.
can live up to. Yes, and it can be foolish, Max.
Right.
But you still do what's right. Sometimes doing what's right is bad for you, but you still do it. You know why, Max?
Expedient and foolish are two different things. And in fact, I think it's wrong to do to the player in the first place. Therefore, the entire idea of the integrity of the system is undermined before they make the quote-unquote commitment.
But my point to you, Max, is this. Okay, then if you're McCaffrey, to use him as this example, then sit out before the season.
Yes.
But once you commit to the season, you commit to the season. Hold on. You spoke. You're sitting up there and acting as if it is perfectly okay, and I'm not saying McCaffrey did this, let's be clear. But you're literally using Jadeveon Clowney as an example. You're literally saying it's okay to commit to playing the season, going into the game, and giving a half-ass effort because you're monitoring your health for the future instead of going all out. What I'm saying is, then why play? Why not sit down?
You guys are
especially when you had the cachet going into the season when you would have went to the NFL.
You guys are accusing me of making a moral relativistic argument.
Yes.
That is correct, I am.
Yes.
I'm making a morally relativistic argument because pragmatically, in the real world, I think this does apply. And while you're right about honoring commitments, even in a coerced situation, it is unethical toward the other players. I think that pragmatically speaking, the not the expediency, but the wisdom of protecting yourself overrides it in this case, particularly because they are not playing for a national championship game. And if you want to be doctrinaire about morality, then you can argue, if you want to be hard about it, then you can argue that you can't make a morally relativistic argument. It doesn't matter what you're playing for. They are playing in the Sun Bowl. And does that change it?
Look,
yes, it does.
You're right. It's pragmatic. You're right. It could be wise. But the point of principles is to do what's right when it's hard. The point of principles is to do what's right when it's against your own interest. Otherwise, just don't have principles.
You can do it.
I agree with Will on that one.
It is important to do what's right when it is inconvenient, I agree, but not when it is foolish. And I think it would be foolish in this case.
Well, then why is if it's so foolish, then why play at all?
He has no choice.
No. He came off, hold on. He came off a 2,000-yard season.
Right.
Christian McCaffrey could have sat out and still his value would have been there. Clowney could have sat out, and still his value would have, one could argue, still his value would have been there. You didn't have to. You didn't have to.
Yes,
if you're going to be up in there,
the system is rigged to try to make these guys play. And I think it's okay to say,
heard your point,
as the season unfolds and you have a view of what's going to happen, if you are in the Sun Bowl, it's not the same thing as playing for a national title.
Guys, we got to get a break in, but great debate. And
I can't
both of you
believe Steve
making
and I are on the same
really
side. It's an uncomfortable
really strong
place to be.
arguments. And I have a feeling our
I almost
audience
feel like I got to take a shower.
divided on this.
Me too.
You guys are unbelievable. Will staying with us when we come back.
First Take is brought to you by Geico. 15 minutes could save you 15% or more on car insurance.
How does he handle the big moment?
You have to take everything into consideration.
Why?
For what?
Come on, dude.
He sued everybody.
Yeah.
Everybody.
Now we have to watch what's actually happening.
The USA.
I'm good.
The countdown continues. We're just about 2 weeks away from First Take's big move to ESPN. Make sure you join us as we go from 2 to 1 on January 3rd. We're going to have some great special guests. Looking forward to it in our first week. We've got Ice Cube, Hall of Famer Jim Kelly, and a live performance by Wale.